you for the bits and bytes to start flowing through there. I'm going to just make sure I have all those amazing photos at my fingertips so we can have a multimedia display. Oh, hi everybody. I see Slissa, Irv, TJ, Irion, Aim. Hey everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Come on in. Have a seat, grab some coffee or tea, or if it's the middle of the evening for you, perhaps a lovely glass of wine. And we're going to talk today in just a few minutes with Rayne Hall. I'm so excited for this. We'll give everybody a couple minutes to join us live. Hi, everybody. Hey, Liz. Hey, Wayne. I love seeing everybody. Well, virtually seeing everybody. Robin, we've got, oh my gosh, I love how worldwide we are. Austin, Reno, Scotland, Huntsville, Alabama, Rocket City. Go Rocket City Trash Pandas. Woo woo. They have a new minor league baseball team called the Rocket City Trash Pandas, and I have decided that's my new favorite minor league baseball team because their logo is so great. And 2 years ago, a topic for another fireside chat, I think, a couple of years ago, I had a cat door in my window, the window mount ones. And so my cat could, go in and out. And surprise, raccoons love that as well. So I had like a dozen raccoons in my house. So we called it Raccoonapalooza. It was terrifying. Hi, Sulu. Hi, the real star of the show.
So good, yes. Yes.
So
my lucky black cat, Zulu.
Among Rayne's many, many talents and hobbies, training cats is one of them. So you're witnessing this firsthand. Cats can be trained. Sulu, we're going to talk about him today. He's wonderful. But we'll start with the human.
Sulu, stand. Sulu, stand. Come, stand. Oh, he doesn't show, does he?
He's camera shy.
Oh, no, he is not camera shy. Not really, but the camera is set up to show me rather than him.
Maybe he's just angry about that. The camera should be pointed to me.
I think what he's angry about or disappointed about is there is no book for him to read. He loves to read books. So when there is an open book, he immediately wants to read it. Let's try that, huh? Sulu, there is a book. Sulu, do you want to read the book? Yes, read. Sulu, read. The camera isn't set up for it, but you've got to.
I have a photo of that.
Of Sulu reading books. So whenever he sees an open book, he lies down next to the book and one sort of paw in front of him and the other on the page, and then he reads.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Sulu is terrific, and I'm going to work on getting those pictures up for us here. In the meantime, I guess we could introduce the human that we're all here to talk to today. The wonderful Rayne Hall, prolific author of author help books, which is wonderful. We see a couple people in the comments already saying, I have a few of your books, and so lovely to see you live today. But also just a master of Gothic horror, and in particular, Bulgarian horror, which is kind of a niche. And I have, I was so worried about getting props and photos for Rayne that I forgot my book. Oh, you know what? Here it is. So I have my copy of The Bride's Curse.
And notice the black cat on the cover.
I love it. I love it. So, Rayne, tell us a little bit about yourself. And I think the first question, I know you get this a lot, is you're living in Bulgaria, but your accent doesn't, it seems rather unusual. So do you want to tell us a little bit about where you grew up and where you've lived and
I'm German. And I've lived in quite a few countries. I've lived for short periods in Mongolia, in China, in Nepal. And for many, many years, I lived in England. And that's why my accent is British English with a German accent.
British English with a German accent. So I feel like we used to try to get people to guess what Gareth's accent is, and people got that right a remarkable number of times. But yours, I don't know that anyone would have guessed that. So that's just
maybe we should have done that as a game. And
we could have done a giveaway or something. Oh, well, the secret's out now, rats. Well, so I'm seeing more and more people saying, I just love your writing books. And we're going to talk about those a little bit later. But first, give us a little bit of your background, Rayne, how you got into writing and writing horror, and in particular, Gothic. What was your journey like?
I never wanted to write horror. This was, for me, horror, I don't like violence and gore. But whenever I wrote something, I wrote romance stories, I wrote historical stories, I wrote a lot of fantasy, I wrote humor, I wrote just about everything. And I wrote a few horror stories. And everything got rejected. Probably many of you know that feeling when one story after another gets rejected for months, for years. And then one week, I suddenly had 3 acceptances in a row. And all 3 were horror. And that's when I thought, yeah, maybe writing horror is actually my niche. But I didn't want to be a horror writer. I actually fought against it because I really don't like violence and gore. And it took me a while to understand that I didn't need to write violence and gore to write horror, because violence and gore are optional. They work for some kinds of horror, but not all horror is extreme. Not all horror is Steampunk. And there are all these more subtle, quiet types of horror, psychological horror and Gothic horror and things like that. And that's much more my thing. So that's how I got into writing horror, because that's what my readers wanted. And then I chose the type of horror that I really enjoy, and I just love creeping my readers out. And I like to create a spooky atmosphere and lots of suspense and all very creepy and eerie. And I just adore that. So that is my kind of horror.
That's wonderful. And we've got some amazing pictures to share, because you do so much in the Gothic space, which really is atmosphere, creepiness, just an immersive feeling. So you do a lot of location research, and I imagine Bulgaria is rich with it, abandoned houses or locations. Tell us a little bit about some of the amazing things that you've found doing.
You see, any country is rich in creepy locations. You just need to look for them. And there are different kind of creepy locations wherever you live. Now, here in Bulgaria, it's especially abandoned houses. Because the population in Bulgaria is dwindling. So when old people die, there are no young people to move into those houses. And then those houses stand empty, and they are empty for years, for decades. And I love going into them because each has its own atmosphere, its own character. Sometimes there still are remnants of furniture in there. There are still tattered lace curtains hanging there. Occasionally you find things like an old teapot or something. The other day I walked inside an old house, and I found a wooden spindle, which obviously decades ago had been used by a woman to spin. And these I go inside these houses and I absorb the atmosphere and the stories they have to tell. And some of them have such a wonderful, joyful, peaceful vibe. Yes, this house is near where I live in my village, Kirilovo. That's in the Yambol province in southeast Bulgaria. This is one of my favorite houses. And you may recognize that cat coming with me. Sulu likes to go on walks with me, and he particularly likes to visit abandoned houses. So he goes inside there and he sniffs at every corner and lies on the windowsills. Sometimes he climbs up on the broken rafters and looks down on me.
And
And while I walk around and I take notes about the atmosphere of the place, I listen to the sounds, the sound of my footsteps crunching over those broken roof tiles, and I touch the walls, and I really absorb every detail, the little, the wafting cobwebs, here you can see this was a chimney and that is caved in. And there are the built-in cupboards, which are quite typical for Bulgarian architecture. And it's a single-story house, and you can see the roof. This is this woven from these twigs, and it was covered in mud. This is how they used to do the ceilings in the old houses, and that has now fallen in after the roof itself has fallen in. And I just love going in there, and my cat loves to come with me. The interesting thing is some houses have a definite evil atmosphere. It is, I don't know how to describe it, but I can feel it. I can feel it myself, and sort of there is like it gets cold in my chest, and like something contracts along my back, like sort of the skin and the muscles pull together, and it just feels colder even though the temperature isn't dropping. And even weirder, my cat, who loves exploring these houses, there are some houses he absolutely won't enter. He stands there, arcing his back, first bristling, the tail rigid up, and he refuses to go in there. And I think he probably senses something that even I don't. And for me, as a writer, these houses are wonderful. So I go in there and I think, who lived there? What story do they have to tell? Why did they leave? What if they didn't really leave? What if they died but are still there? Or what if somebody, for some reason, enters this house? Why? Why do they have to come here? What if they have to stay here and can't go away? What if they are not alone? What if there is a ghost, a vampire, a zombie, a murderer, a serial killer? What if they have an appointment with someone? What if they were lured there by an estate agent promising them a cheap property to buy? And I just let my imagination run wild.
that is so lovely. And the photos that you've shared with us, I'm just going to pull one more up to the screen. Oops, I dropped it. Because even the most benign looking house, if you view it as...
No, but this one is not abandoned. That's my own home.
Wait, no, I was thinking we could make that like feel any way we wanted to if we're approaching it with the right lens. But I love this. Where does Zulu sit here?
He's probably busy sleeping on my bed.
This
house here, this is okay, we'll get back to that. Now this one here is creepy.
This one is the one I meant to move that I dropped it before and I picked up the wrong one.
Yeah. Now this is one that Zulu absolutely refuses to enter.
Wow.
And it is cursed. There have been murders inside that house, documented murders. The last person who owned it and lived there suddenly disappeared. Nobody knew where he'd gone to. The house stood empty. And then a year and a half later, his body was found dismembered in the freezer. That sort of thing was going on there. And I didn't know that, but my cat obviously did.
Wow. Wow. And I love how you were able to describe the physical feelings that you get in addition to where you see Zulu reacting and you just feel that creepiness in your back and the tightness in your chest. These are wonderful physical cues that then you can incorporate into writing as people are, as your characters are experiencing this, perhaps. Does that work?
Always. The sort of visceral impressions, not just what I hear and what I see and what I smell, but also sometimes, say a tightness in the throat, or if I get frightened, it feels like my bladder is full, or sometimes maybe my scalp itches. But very often with these abandoned houses, it actually feels wonderful. Now, this one here, it felt really nice. I did not sense anything evil about this house until, well, I heard the story. It was the local priest who told me the story of the house.
Wow.
And until then, I didn't understand why the neighbors all tried to stop me from going in.
Oh, wow.
But it's really lovely when you go up those stairs, the outside stairs leading up there. It's a beautiful sunny parlor that must have been so nice once upon a time.
It's how much the home's experience has changed how we view it. That's remarkable. And I hear that there is even, I'm going to go back to your house now. This one, the cottage, the sunny cottage.
Well, it is a nice single-story house where several previous owners each added another bit. So it has quite an odd shape. You can't quite see how odd it is from this angle. There's more bits to various sides. But it's nice, and I added my little bit to it too. And I love it. But, you know, in Gothic fiction, there is this trope that the main character discovers a secret chamber somewhere in this house. In Gothic fiction, there's usually a mansion, a manor, a castle, or some old building. And then a hidden room gets discovered. It's secret or it's forbidden, and you mustn't go in, or nobody knows that it's there, and there's something terrible hiding in there. And I always thought, oh no, that's cliched. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to write anything about a hidden chamber in a house. I mean, if there is a chamber somewhere, surely the owners know about it. It's not possible. And I didn't want to write anything so cliched. So, yeah, until a workman was up on the roof doing some repairs in the area of the chimney, and then he also went and rehung some roof tiles, and there is a boiler somewhere up there. I don't quite know what he did, and then he suddenly came back and he said, "Do you know there is a room up there?" Room? Oh yes, there is a room up there, and it is full of really weird things. So there was a collection of studded leather belts, black skull caps, a tug of war rope, a bed, but not an open bed to use. It was one of those self-assembly beds, and it was still in its original packaging. And this room up there, this hidden room under the roof, it can be accessed only if you put a ladder up at the edge of the at the edge of the picture, towards the left of the picture, and go up there and then walk across the roof and climb up there to behind. It's sort of next to where that high bit with the chimney is. And how and why somebody would carry all that stuff up there over a ladder? The workman had difficulty bringing it down. So why somebody would do that? It puzzles me. And what puzzles me even more is there was this chamber discovered in my own house. I lived there for 1.5 years, and I had no idea. Now, is that Gothic or what?
That is the most Gothic thing I've ever heard from you. And I've heard a lot of Gothic things from you.
I think possibly I have another experience coming up, which is going to be perhaps even more Gothic. A couple of Germans whom I met on the internet asked me to help them find a house to buy here in Bulgaria, in my village. And I did, and we viewed some houses, and they chose one, and they bought it. And the seller said, well, you know, this door here, it contains a room. It's bricked up. It's always been bricked up. It's been bricked up since the time of my grandmother. Nobody knows really why it was bricked up. I think she just didn't have a use for the space and therefore closed that door. Now, if somebody has no use for a room, surely they would just lock it up.
Close the door.
Perhaps put a bookcase or a cup or something in front of it. But brick it up.
That's extreme. Something happened.
Something. And what was it? So my friends are going to have that opened. And they have agreed that I may be there and watch everything going on. Now I'm going to take lots of notes about all these
Oh,
nice details about what it sounds like and what it looks like. And then we go inside, what it smells like and what we find. Maybe we really just find an empty room. It is possible. Or maybe we find something quite different. So these hidden rooms, they exist in reality.
wow.
And I used to think these were just cliche tropes, which I was not going to use.
Now I feel you must. The universe is telling you must.
Oh, yes. My imagination is already spinning like crazy in my head. There are always thousands of ideas all spinning around and they all want to be written. It's like my head is haunted by ideas and each of them demands that I write it first.
Mm.
Oh, there's never a quiet moment for a writer. But
So
sometimes there are ideas, they click together like jigsaw pieces. There are these hundreds or maybe thousands ideas spinning around, and sometimes 2 or 3 of them click together like in a jigsaw, and that's then the beginning of a story.
do you just know? How do you keep them all straight? How do you organize them, or do they just
Keeping ideas straight. Oh, if you know how to do that, I don't.
Right? The floor is
what I
open
tend
for
to do
anyone.
is, I often start with the location. That for me is
Mm.
just so inspiring. I love that. The creepier, the better. And then I think about the person. What kind of person might be there and why? And from there, the motivation. What do they want? And why can't they just leave when things get uncomfortable or dangerous? And from there, then I develop a bit of their personality and what they want and what obstacles are in the way. What other person might be there and in what way do that person's goals clash with the first person's? And that usually gives me a story. And then I just have to choose how to end it. Like either the monster wins or the human wins. Or maybe the human wins, but there is actually an even bigger monster. Or maybe the human wins but regrets it. So there are all these variations.
That's wonderful. The human winning with dire aftermath consequences. Just
Yes.
lovely. Very.
Yes. Oh, you can do so much. When the human wins, the main character wins, gets what she set out to do, achieves it. But then she realizes that doing it has cost her the love of her life, or her children have died because of it, or by doing it, she has sold her soul to the devil, or whatever. It is, yes, she has won, but
Yeah.
that's just wonderful material. I love that.
It's the yes, but, and the opposite of that is the no and kind of
Oh,
segues.
the no but, the no but.
The
She
no
didn't
but is good
achieve
as
what she
well.
wanted, but she got something else.
Mm.
Or she lost against the monster. The monster is eating her, but she has been able to save her child, or something like that. This I like this kind of yes but or no but ending much more than when everything is dire and lost, which of course has its place in horror, or when everything is happy and cheesy and everything has worked out wonderfully, which can work well in romance sometimes.
Well, and that's a great segue, because the idea of Gothic atmosphere is so associated with horror, but it can really work well in many other genre. Can you tell us a little bit about your thoughts on how to fold that in?
Well, I don't think that Gothic necessarily means horror. There are so many ways how to use Gothic. I see it as something like a layer, something you layer on top of another genre. So, yes, you can layer it with horror, like I do. That works really well. Oh, I love it. Or you can, another popular one is layering it with the romance genre.
Mm.
Adding a bit of creepiness and lots of suspense works really nicely. historical.
Oh, nice.
Gothic and historical go well together. Thriller, the Gothic thriller. Wow. It's also a very natural match for fantasy. Oh, and another great one is layering the Gothic with steampunk.
Tell me about that.
Well, imagine a nice old mansion filled with, well, gaslit, of course, sort of shadows, and there's this big sweeping staircase. And one of the Gothic tropes is a mad scientist. That often happens. Someone who has maybe a laboratory or invents crazy things. That is perfect with steampunk. So just instead of just having this mad scientist or inventor working in an office, have him work in a cellar, in a big old decaying mansion, or have him do something. Well, he may kidnap people for his experiments and keep them imprisoned in that mansion. So there are so many things you can do with it.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, I haven't seen any Gothic paired with science fiction, but that's just about the only thing I haven't seen yet, and it doesn't mean it can be done. In Gothic, we have a lot of much of it focuses on the location. That's very important in Gothic. So we have usually a big mansion, maybe a small mansion, probably crumbling, perhaps abandoned and derelict, like houses here in Bulgaria, or it could be something that is still inhabited. Perhaps there is a once upon a time rich and important family living in that castle, and now they no longer have the funds to really maintain it well, so it's starting to crumble. Maybe the facade still looks grand, but behind it, everything is falling to pieces. Then there is this, usually the location is quite isolated, which works, of course, well for horror because people can't easily get help. And it may be the weather plays a big role, so there may be storm, wind, howling at night. And these things you can use so well in romance or in historical fiction or anything. I recommend just view the Gothic as a layer which you put on top of something else to add this excitement and suspense and atmosphere, just enriching it. Don't use Gothic pure. That tends to be a bit cliched. But the moment when you mix it in with whatever else you're writing and you give it your own personal twist with your own personal interests, then it really works. When I say personal interest, in my case, of course, that means most stories include a black cat somewhere. And lots of, yes, I have a lot of abandoned houses in my stories. For you, it may be something quite different. You may write about a once grand hotel or about a rich manor house or whatever. Historical novelists or historical romance novelists, they can write about the governess arriving at this remote house somewhere in the Scottish Highlands or wherever. And you can really adapt it to suit whatever you are doing.
It sounds so clear when you say it that way. And I am thinking back over many books, and there are Gothic elements that were subtle and effective, but I didn't label them as Gothic because they were just so effective in setting the atmosphere. And that sounds
there
like
are so many of the great classics are actually Gothic. They're just not pure Gothic. They're Gothic plus something. Yeah. So when you look at things like Dracula, when you look at Jane Eyre, Northanger Abbey, Wuthering Heights, The Fall of the House of Usher, they are Gothic, very, very strongly Gothic. Think of Jane Eyre.
Yes.
The hidden room in the attic with a mad woman.
Oh, that's right.
It's surprising how many works of fiction of the great classics actually have very, very strong Gothic elements.
That's wonderful. And I love that it's kind of subtle and not labeled and so overt. Would Rebecca be considered Gothic?
Definitely, definitely. Do you remember the first sentence of Rebecca?
I don't. That actually came from
Last
YouTube.
night I dreamt I went to Manderley again. Manderley is this grand house, very beautiful, that's past its best days. And there is this shut off wing, not just this hidden chamber, but one whole wing shut off. And also in Gothic fiction, very often this old building, it gets destroyed at the end, often in a fire. What happens to Manderley? At the end of the novel, they see it burned down. Mr. Rochester's house in Jane Eyre, it burns down. There are many classic novels which actually end in the destruction of a building, which is another one of those tropes, which I hope is not going to happen to my house here.
No, definitely not. So that is a trope. So we've mentioned the finding of a secret room, the potential destruction or burning down of a dilapidated, seen better days, I guess, grandiose house. What are a couple of other Gothic tropes that you see a lot?
The main character arrives there alone. She or he is without any support system, without friends or family, can't easily contact someone. In modern days, this means that there is no cell phone reach, of course. Then there is storm, a stormy landscape, quite remote. Often there is a dog.
Oh,
in my case, I've varied that. I've got a cat instead in my stories. Often somebody is mad, insane in some way, or it could simply be a mental illness. Bigamy is a very big feature.
really?
Again, bigamy, yes. This is very, very big. Now, think of Jane Eyre.
Mm-hmm.
The main character is about to marry Mr. Rochester when it's discovered that he is already married and he has his first wife locked up in the secret chamber in the attic. And why? Because she is mad. It's a mad woman in the attic now. So it's amazing how many of those tropes always fit in. Then there is often a corrupt priest or nun or guru or something, some corrupt spiritual religious person.
Mm-hmm.
Then there is often some kind of communication with the other side, communication with the dead, communication with the other world, some time travel or a message from the dead, Ouija board or anything like that works well. An old document gets found, often in an old book. May, of course, be found in the hidden chamber or just in the dusty library or somewhere, which is often a will. And the will often reveals that the house doesn't really belong to its current owners because several generations ago, there was a case of bigamy. And so all the descending line is not true.
Ooh.
And then there will be people who fight to hide the secret. And that's when it can get quite scary and violent, and when it can develop into a thriller. Oh, there are wonderful things you can do with all these.
That sounds lovely. I'm so thankful for all the thousands of story ideas floating around in your head. Speaking of how Gothic can be more pure, I feel like you're writing Bulgarian Gothic horror. Now, what makes that different? Just that it's set in Bulgaria, or?
Because yes, it is set in Bulgaria. When I lived in Britain, I wrote British horror. And I also wrote some German horror, and I've written some horror stories set in Nepal and in China, of course. And now I'm really into this writing spooky stories set in Bulgaria. And I want to do more of this. And I wish there were more people writing it, not just me. Well, it's nice to be the author of Bulgarian Gothic. It would be even better if there were more authors of Bulgarian Gothic, so that people actually recognize this as a genre.
Wouldn't that be
But
wonderful?
I'm thinking maybe Balkan Gothic. Now, Balkan, that is the area in Eastern Europe around the Balkan mountain range.
Mhm.
And that includes Romania, or as some of you maybe know better, the region of Transylvania, where Dracula is set. So I want to include Bram Stoker's Dracula in this genre. So if there's anyone out there who is willing to write short stories or novels or something Gothic set anywhere around here, please get in touch with me. We can do something together.
Yes, she can share photos and maybe even a video tour of some of the abandoned homes in your region, in your village. So if anybody has questions for Rayne, pop them in the chat. Just let us know, and we will have time for Q&A as we kind of approach the ending of this. I do want to pull up, we mentioned Sulu loves to read, and I have a quick photo here of him busy at work reading one of your books, Rayne, and then
Yes. And there's another one I think I've given you also of him reading.
Taking a bit of a sunny break,
Yes.
reading Bride's Curse. He doesn't
Yes.
seem that impressed that his doppelganger is here on the cover.
He likes this book. He likes it very much.
Oh, good. Look at him go. And now tell me, does he only read your books, or does he have a preferred genre, or tell me?
I must say he is very fond of horror. He also likes books about gardening, and he had special interest in a book I once had about garden birds. But there was once I gave, he does not like romance. And once I gave him a book of feminist poetry, and he vomited over it.
Sulu is a tough critic. He gave that one 2 claws down. Oh.
When I write, he likes to lie on a desk between my arms, and he puts one paw on my wrist and his head in my elbow, and then he goes to sleep. But sometimes he wakes up and looks very critically at what I've written, and sometimes he just types something in, usually an F word starting with F, 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 F. And it gets very weird when he actually answers emails or tweets. I was editing an anthology. I was editing Fiend, 10 Tales of Demons some years ago. And so I was the editor of that anthology, and I was selecting stories, and I had made a list of stories, and Sulu was very interested in the list of stories I was considering. And I said to him, "Oh, I'm sorry, there are no stories about cats in here." And then I went and made myself a cup of coffee, and I came back, and he had highlighted one of the stories on the list. And the title of that story was The Last Tiger. It has to be coincidence, doesn't it? It can't be anything else.
I don't know.
I don't know either. With this cat, I'm not sure.
So we have another magnificent picture of Sulu in an abandoned house. He looks quite comfortable.
He is very comfortable, isn't he? He just likes it. I was walking around there, and I was taking notes, and there were things like bits of household items lying around, broken, and there were these cobwebs and the plaster falling down, and there were bits of remnants of light fittings and such still in this house. And I was taking these notes, and Sulu was making himself comfortable there on that windowsill. And he likes these windowsills in the abandoned houses where he can look outside into the bright light, and inside into the sort of creepy rooms. And he can watch me and he can watch the birds outside, and he just loves that. And this here is one of Sulu's favorite houses. This is the same house,
That's
but I
beautiful.
think a different windowsill. He just loves that. And I'm so lucky to have this cat who comes with me. I think most cats would not be interested in coming for walks or coming into abandoned houses, but he is a perfect horror writer's cat, isn't he?
He really is. He's so perfect. How did you ever come to be his, well, owner? Cats have staff, right? They have staff people.
Okay. Maybe some cat lovers have just laughed. I wanted a cat. That was several years ago when I still lived in Britain, and I went to a cat shelter. And they were very thorough about checking me out. They checked my flat out to make sure that I really could offer a cat a proper home. And then I went there, and they had a few cats. And I walked from they were in different, like, kennel buildings. And I walked from one to the other. And then the volunteer who had checked my house and interviewed me said, "In the next kennel, there is a cat I would like you to meet. Take some time with him. He is a bit skittish at first." So there was this kitten, about 8 months old, black. Seemed a bit shy at first, but I followed the volunteer's advice and spent some time with him. And then he allowed me to stroke him, and then he tried to crawl into my jacket sleeve. And he seemed very pleased with me. And I thought, yes, this is probably the cat I want. And I went away, looked at the other cats, and then I thought, no, this is the only cat that really responded to me, so I'm going to adopt him. And I went back, and he was so happy that I'd come back for him, that I took him back straight away. And the interesting thing is, he was such a cutie, so sweet, gentle-natured, pretty, intelligent, the ideal cat, but he had been in the shelter for 5 months. Nobody wanted him simply because he was black. So most people who went to the shelter, they wanted to adopt tabbies and whites and gingers. Nobody wanted a black cat. So Sulu came with me, and we are both very happy about that.
Absolutely. It could not be a more perfect match.
I mean, for a horror writer, a cat that loves to read horror books and pose for photos and visit abandoned houses, and it couldn't be better.
It could not be better. So we do have a couple of questions coming in from our viewers. I'm going to pull that. So Liz, one of our AutoCrit family members, let's say, she lives in Scotland. So this has made her start thinking of writing Gothic stories from the history she knows of some of the buildings in Scotland, which I feel is just magnificent. So, Rayne, do you research the history of the buildings first and then create the stories? How does that process work for you?
Sometimes when I can research the history, like, for example, a castle or something like that, then yes, I do research the history as much as possible. And if I use the actual building as it is and name it such and such castle, then obviously I need to get the history right. If I just invent a castle or other building that is based on or inspired by the real one, then I allow myself to take liberties. But with many abandoned buildings, it's impossible to find the history.
Right.
I may ask local people, and my video is up to it, and they may sometimes say something like, well, this was an old lady who used to play the violin who lived here and nothing else. But that in itself can be enough to set off ideas. Once there was a ruined house. It was really just a ruin, and there were these old mulberry trees there. And there were weird things hanging from the branches, like broken dolls and coffee cups and bicycle tires and stuff like that. No idea who hung them there. So I asked the neighbors, who used to live there. And they said, oh, nobody has lived here for 40 years. The last person who lived there, I think he was taken to a place for mentally ill people. Very Gothic, of course.
Very Gothic.
So
Very.
yeah, just walk around, even in your neighborhood or wherever you happen to be in Scotland, and don't just look for the known creepy places. Find creepy places. Let yourself be inspired. Be open-minded about what you see, and then just explore. Have fun.
And it's such a lovely day, or such a lovely way to spend an afternoon. Look at that gorgeous sunshine that we saw in some of the abandoned home photos that Rayne has shared with us today. Just wonderful to get out there and explore. And if there is a history, you can find it, and find it from the locals or from property records, maybe, or the locals are probably a terrific.
Yeah, like the priest who told me about the murders at the
Yes,
church.
that's exactly what I was thinking of. Oh my goodness. So let's see. And I want to talk in a moment about your Writer's Craft series. And I think as we move into that, one of the questions, so David R. has a question in our chat here. One of the questions that we see a lot in the AutoCrit community is about marketing and how best to get your name and your brand out there. Yeah. What are your thoughts about that, Rayne? How did you do it, and what do you recommend?
I think thinking in terms of brand is very important for marketing. People need to recognize your name as standing for something. Like for me, people recognize me as the author of the Blue Writer's Craft books of creepy stories, like Gothic stories or Gothic horror. People know that, and so people. They know that I don't write gory, violent horror, right? My brand of horror is that sort of atmospheric, creepy, Gothic. So what I do is I don't just tweet and post on Facebook and advertise about buy my book. What I do is I post pictures or texts or anything that is creepy and atmospheric and suspenseful. For example, I post photos of the creepy houses I'm visiting. This does promote my brand. Now, this will not immediately sell lots of books, but it does establish what kind of fiction Rayne Hall writes. And the kind of people who are drawn to that kind of picture or that kind of tweet, post, blog post, or whatever, they are likely to be at least interested in my books and to check them out. Brand building, I think, is the key really for success, but it is a long-term thing. You need more than one book, and you really need to stand for something. Many writers make the mistake, they go on the social media and they tweet or post all the time, buy my book, buy my wonderful book, buy my book here, buy this special offer book there, hurry, buy, and nobody pays any attention. Because frankly, who pays attention to advertisements? So I'd say just stop that. Focus on entertaining the people in the social media instead.
If you have a cat that likes to visit abandoned houses and your brand is Gothic horror, it's a gold mine. It's a wonderful way to reinforce what you're about.
If you have a pet you can involve in some way, please do, because pets are great in the social media. So when other people's book tweets get ignored, mine, people pay attention to. I have these lots of photos of Sulu reading this book or that book. And so when I tweet about my book, I can say, Sulu, the black book reading cat, recommends writing fight scenes or something like that. And that, of course, already looks much nicer than just a picture.
Go buy my book.
My book. But also in the social media, just be entertaining. Don't look at just promoting, because nobody wants to be promoted. We are all inundated with advertisements. And if you do that, people will just ignore you. But if you post entertaining content, whether that's jokes or informative articles or anything like that, cute pictures of your pets, people will look at it and then they will actually believe that you're able to entertain them with books too.
And they'll see you as a real human being and not just someone who wants to sell them something.
Yes.
Terrific.
Nobody. Oh, by the way, this is one of my other cats. This is Yura. She wants some attention too.
That's fair.
Yura was a tiny, tiny kitten in Bulgaria already. I lived in Bulgaria, and I was this tiny kitten who one day just followed me home, walked in through the door, and moved in. And just she sort of crossed her paws on the chair, and well, I live here now.
That is how most people get.
Sulu accepted her. Of course, I adopted her only with Sulu's consent. Yes, Yura. Look at the camera, Yura. Yura, look there. Look. Show them your face.
Hi. So it is so funny that you mentioned your book on writing fight scenes, because we actually have a viewer, Philip, who's writing a story where the protagonist uses, I'm going to get some of this wrong, bartitsu, jujitsu, boxing, wrestling, foot fighting, and cane fighting. Wow. So would your fighting book cover any of these specialties, or tell us a little bit about what might be
the book wouldn't tell you how to fight, but it would tell you how to structure a fight scene in these styles. So there is a lot of information in there that you can use, and really practical. It's a book about writing the scenes, yeah? It's not a book about fighting. But there are lots of techniques where you can see what do you do if your protagonist is female and she is fighting against a male, or what do you do if she gets attacked and has to defend herself very unexpectedly when she's unprepared. How do you handle this? Ideas how to do it, psychological advantages, disadvantages, what actually goes through a fighter's mind at what stage. When would fighters actually talk to each other and when don't they? The mistakes writers make with fight scenes a lot. So I think you will find it very useful.
That's wonderful. And there's there are a plethora of the blue guides for writers, over 35 of them now. Is that right?
Yes.
My goodness. And so tell us, how did that come to be? How did that get started? And I have so many questions.
Well, it started really, I was teaching online classes on various subjects. And I was teaching an online class on writing fight scenes because many writers struggle with that. And I myself had participated as a student in some of those classes and didn't find them very helpful. So I had thought, well, I can do better. And so I researched it and I really studied fight scenes and what works and what doesn't work. And I broke it down and I really went into this in a big way. And then I taught several times classes about writing fight scenes. And they were so popular with the course organizers, various RWA chapters were organizing courses. And they said, well, my courses are always the most popular ones. They had most participants there and most interaction and all that. So I thought, yes, there is a demand. And then I thought, well, those lessons I've written, I could actually use them in a book. And so I expanded that. If I've written the material, then I can adapt it into a book. So I made a book, Writing Fight Scenes. And that was very popular. And I thought, well, I could adapt my other courses as well, like writing scary scenes. I had a course on writing scary scenes. So that made a book. And then I had one on writing villains, and then another one about writing about magic and so on. And suddenly I had a series. And then I thought, actually, all the things I would have needed years ago when I was a less experienced writer. All the things I wanted to learn and couldn't find any guidance about. All those things I'm going to use and write them as books for more advanced writers, because there's so many books there for beginner writers. Write your first short story, write your first book, how to write a novel. But they are all for beginners, and some of them are very good at teaching the basics. But once you've got the basics, that's when the real learning journey starts, and it's difficult to find something out there. So that's what my series is for. And I really developed it kind of for the writer that I once was, getting these advanced skills that I would have needed then, and that many writers now need.
So with over 35 already out there and available, what's your usual schedule like to write and finish a book? And does that vary tremendously from a Blue Writer's Guide versus a novel that you might write? What does your personal process look like?
I write several books every year. I usually write several books at the same time. So I may be working on a collection of Gothic horror stories at the same time as writing 2 writer's craft books, and possibly writing another book for a client. I also do some ghostwriting, where I write under the client's name and will be published under their name. So it's difficult to time how long it takes, but I would say a month for a nonfiction book. But again, this is, sometimes I can write a book faster if I have the material already. For example, when I've already taught a course and have 12 detailed lectures, which can be adapted into 12 chapters. So I just write another 10 chapters or so, but the book is already half written. As for how and organizing it, well, I have to confess, like many writers, I suffer from chronic procrastination. I have my tricks how to cope with it, but I'm not writing as much as I should. It still bugs me. I mean, what do you do when you have 3 cats and 2 dogs all wanting attention and needing to be fed and wanting cuddles? I mean, that's really essential, isn't it?
It goes food, cuddles.
And when the weather is nice and there are these lovely abandoned homes to explore, I have to go out, don't I?
You have to.
And there are many other reasons. There are always reasons. Yeah, what do I do when the roof leaks? I must spend time with the workmen. I have to call someone to repair it. And then it goes up there, and then I have to deal with the hidden chambers he finds and stuff.
Every time. If I had a nickel for every time a repair guy came to the house and found a secret chamber, it's time consuming. It really is. Can see how that would throw you off schedule with your writing.
But ultimately, it all feeds into the writing, because one day I'm going to write a story in which there will be a secret chamber on the roof.
Now, in your fiction writing, would you consider yourself a plotter or a pantser? Do you love an outline?
Now, that is a question very beloved of beginner writers who have nothing better to think about.
True.
Any writer I know, I mean, any professional writer I know is a mix.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a mix too. Sometimes I start a story and I just write it and see where it takes me. At other times I plot it out. Most often I start with a basic plot, a very, very basic plot. And then I start writing it as a very rough draft, which then takes me into a different direction. And then I allow myself to go with the flow of that. And then I return and I create a new structure. And then I work with that for the revision. So it's a complete mix. But with the nonfiction, that's when I structure it out very, very carefully. But really, this plotting and pantsing, I mean, that is...
It's always
the
a
people who
question.
talk about it are almost always the beginner writers who haven't really done much writing yet. And I would say to them, just try it both and see what works for you. It will probably be a mix.
It's always one of our most popular questions because everybody wants to know what everybody else is doing and how they can try kind of their method and see if it works for them, if they're trying to really figure out what works best for them.
You know, the way to figure that out is not to ask other writers, but to sit down, button seat, and write.
We hear that a lot too. The best way to get better at writing is to write more. And we're like, what? But I have so many podcasts to listen to and haunted houses to go visit.
Yes, this is the procrastination again, isn't it?
It is.
People listen to podcasts instead of writing. Now, everyone here listening. Now, if you go away and you start now on paper, on a computer, or under the shower, or wherever, start plotting your next Gothic story, or do anything practical that you've gained from this, super. But if you just then file this away as another podcast watched and read another book or another blog post or something and don't write, you won't get anywhere. You really have anything you learn, anything you hear, you have to apply it to your writing straight away.
It's not enough to purchase all of Rayne Hall's Writer's Guide books. You actually have to put them into practice.
I have no objection if you want to buy all my books.
Now, if you want to.
I would be much, much happier if you wrote and then your books get successful and somewhere in the acknowledgements you say, thanks to Rayne Hall, I owe her a lot.
Wouldn't that be wonderful? Thanks to all of Rayne Hall's writers.
I'm waiting for a best-selling author to acknowledge me like this. That would be great.
We're on our way. We're working on that. And anyone who's watching this that is having some inspirational thoughts around Gothic horror or how to layer Gothic atmospheric aspects into nearly any genre, be sure to check out Rayne Hall's work. I'm loving The Bride's Curse personally, and the Writer's Craft series. You can get them all on Amazon. So just have a look. She's got a great page there.
Good promotion. The Bride's Curse and writing Gothic fiction.
We just we teach a Nightmare Fuel how to write horror that guarantees sleepless nights. We teach that as a genre writing course, and we just gave away a copy of your How to Write Gothic Horror as a prize drawing at the end of our class. So
yay.
It is on its way to the Philippines. Actually, our student lives in the Philippines, and so it's on its way.
Maybe some Philippine Gothic coming up.
Wouldn't that be wonderful?
I'd love to read that.
Yes.
I've never been to the Philippines, and it would be so nice to read some Philippine Gothic horror.
Oh, well, I will. I'm drawing a blank on his name. Ben, if you're watching, you heard it from Rayne. We would like to see some Filipino Gothic horror inspired by Rayne Hall and guided by the Writer's Craft series, How to Write Gothic Horror. Fantastic. I think we're caught up on, let's see if I missed any of the questions that may have come in later. You have inspired a lot of people to get out there and try their hand at some Gothic elements and find some abandoned houses and maybe even adopt a cat. Now, one question did come through. Did the shelter know that you were a horror author before they introduced you?
Well, the woman from the shelter, a volunteer, she came to interview me to make sure that I was a suitable person to adopt a cat. And she also watched she sort of investigated my home, which was then a flat in Britain. And in Britain, cats have to be indoor-outdoor cats. They have to be allowed outside. So she checked that I had a garden that was safe. And she asked me many questions. And during that interview, I'm sure we talked about writing because she wanted to know what I was doing, what kind of life a cat would have with me.
How will you support
the fact that I was working from home, of course, would be very important because some cats would need constant attention, whereas others can be left alone. So she probably knew, but I'm sure she had no idea what use this I would put the cat to and what this cat would do for me. I mean, she was the one who actually kind of recommended Zulu for me. But I'm sure she could not possibly have known what a wonderful, perfect cat he was for me. I had no idea. And I think Zulu didn't know what he was letting himself in for either.
So wonderful. So, and after she investigated your flat, I'm certain she didn't envision that you would wind up visiting abandoned houses with him and that he would be so, so happy with that. So
no, at that time, I had no plans to move to Bulgaria.
Right. Who would have known? Who would have known? It's just working out so well.
I was living in Britain at the time, and I had planned to spend all my life in Britain. And then, politics, this thing called Brexit happened, and things were beginning to get uncomfortable for Germans in Britain. My legal rights were in doubt. And I thought, I need a plan B in case I have to leave this country. I just need a plan B. What could I do if it comes to the worst? And I thought, well, I'll explore. And I thought, well, Bulgaria might be a good option. So I visited Bulgaria on a holiday and fell in love with it. And I said, this is no longer my plan A. This is no longer my plan B. This is now my plan A. This is where I really want to live. Forget Britain. And then the big thing was, of course, A, how do I get my cat there? And B, can I earn a living in Bulgaria? And that's the great thing about being a writer. I can live and work anywhere in the world. All I need is a computer and internet. And I think being a writer is the safest career choice anyone can make, really.
I agree with that. That's wonderful. Rayne, thank you so much. This has been incredibly inspirational. I'm seeing tons of kudos in the chat here, and we're just so thrilled that you joined us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. If anybody is interested, check Rayne out on Amazon. Her Writer's Craft series has something for everyone. I'm certain of it. So
if anyone still has any questions, get in touch with me directly.
Yeah,
on Twitter or Facebook or anywhere. You'll find me, I'm sure, or on my website. You can contact me there.
She does have a website.
Yeah, but above all, get writing. Yeah, don't just spend your time watching podcasts.
Don't come over here and hang out with us just to avoid writing. You have to actually put your butt in the seat and get your hands on the keyboard or your pen to paper. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rayne. I appreciate it. I'll go ahead and end the broadcast. And this is being recorded and it's out there on YouTube. So if anybody wants the replay, it will be available as soon as the YouTube genies are done processing it, and it'll just pop right back up there. So you can watch it again and again. I know several people will definitely do that. So
I won't, because I always hate hearing my voice. And I will never want to edit what I said, tidy up the grammar, express my answers better. No, I won't watch it.
I won't. I'll just talk to you in person again, one-to-one again. So we'll do it that way instead, Rayne. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Ciao, ciao.